Hello everybody, this is a video from Miss Dockwell's classroom and this is part 1 of how to analyse a literature extract. This is for the CIE 0475 literature paper 3 and it's focused on the play A Raisin in the Sun. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at what you have to do for paper 3, which is your drama paper. So unlike the other paper, paper 1, this is just a single question on a single text. So obviously you will choose the drama that you have studied and you do get a choice between either the extract question or the full play question, but you will spend your whole time on the question that you choose and you've got 45 minutes for this particular exam. So please remember, as always, use your time wisely. Make sure you read through the extract. You make sure that you are highlighting all of the quotations that you feel that you may be able to use and comment on, that you are planning your answer before you start to write it up, just to ensure that everything that you're going to say is relevant and there's a clear structure to your answer. Spend about 25 to 30 minutes writing up your answer and then do give yourself a few minutes at the end to just check through. So it is going to be much easier for you if you practice this method time and time again before you get to the exam. So it can be quite difficult at first to understand how to respond to an extract in time conditions, and a lot of pupils do say that it's difficult for them to know what to say. So if you practice this over and over again with different questions, different examples, different extracts, then it should become quite familiar to you by the time you get to the exam. You know what you're doing. So today I'm just going to focus on how to approach the extract question. So before we do that, let's just have a quick look at what's expected from you in terms of the assessment objectives and the mark scheme. So don't panic about how you're supposed to answer the question or how your answer should look or what you need to include. If you just think about the different assessment objectives from the mark scheme, this should kind of help you to focus yourself a little bit more. So we'll start off with AO1 and AO2, and I've just joined these together for the purpose of this because they do kind of work well together. So first of all, we need to have evidence that you've got a very good understanding of the extract. So this means that you understand who is involved, what's happening, why this section is significant to the story. So you want to really think to yourself, what can I say about this character and how this character develops? Or what can I say about these relationships? Or how is this particular event presented? Or why does this character say what they do? Why do they act in this way? So you've kind of got to show that you understand the full extract, how it begins, how it ends, how it progresses, to really get your marks for AO1. You must make reference to the text, so because this is the extract question, you have to make sure that you use quotations and that you've got a close analysis of these quotations. If you pick the second question, which is your full play question, it is slightly different and you will find yourself paraphrasing quite a lot. And that's okay, but for this particular question, because you have the extract in front of you, please do try and be as analytical as you can and really focus on the language or the techniques or the methods. Got to show that you've got an understanding of the deeper meaning of ideas and attitudes. So what is expressed to you? Infer, interpret, try and give your own personal response and interpretation to language, or even the way something is structured or laid out, or even the stage directions. And focus on the writer's intention. So what is Hansberry trying to show you? What does she want you to understand? What does she want you to think? What does she want you to feel? Making reference to context would help you with this. So with relevant contextual information, if you are going to mention context, then do make sure that it's relevant to what you've already mentioned. Please don't just bolt on contextual information to the end of a paragraph and say, you know, this is about civil rights. It's not relevant unless it links to a point that you're trying to make. So you can, particularly for this play, link together writer's intention and relevant contextual information. If you mention segregation or discrimination, then that is contextual information. But if you say that Hansberry is trying to show you the effects of segregation, then it's also context and writer's intention. In terms of AO3, you need to show that you've got an ability to demonstrate a good understanding of how the events, the characters, the relationships are presented to you. So presented always refers to the techniques that have been used or the methods that have been used by the writer. And in particular, there's mention of language, structure and form. So you want to try and show that you've got an understanding of all of these different things. Now, obviously, language is probably going to be a little bit easy for you. This is to do with word choice, or it could be imagery, or it could be the way in which somebody speaks, or the language that determines that character. Structure is to do with maybe how the extract is organised, how it begins, how it ends, how ideas progress. It can also be to do with how much somebody speaks. It could be to do with the order in which people speak, how often they speak. And form. Please remember that the form of this is a play. Plays are meant to be watched. They're not really meant to be read. So if you can comment on that, with that in mind, that there is an audience and it is meant to be watched. And there are various different techniques that you need to talk about in order to show that you do understand the form. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail about these on the next slide. So as well as being able to comment on language structure and form, you should also show that you understand why something has been presented in this way. So why is this word being used, or why is this metaphor being used, or why does this character say this particular thing at this particular time? And again, this can link back to writer's intention and also effect on the audience. AO4 is really to do with how you then structure your essay and how you write your essay. So presenting your ideas in a coherent and relevant way, but also showing that you've developed your own personal response to the extract. So please don't worry about having to sit down and remember everything that your teacher has said to you about this particular extract. It's not really about regurgitating conversations that you've had in class or ideas that you've gone through with your teacher. It's really about, what do you see? What do you understand? What can you say about this particular extract? How are you interpreting characters? So try and develop this personal response. And again, practice will definitely help you with this. Okay, so a few things about the form. So as I've already mentioned, it is a play. It's meant to be watched. But also consider the setting with a play, particularly this setting. So there is a description of the setting at the very beginning of the play. So if you need to go back and have a quick look at that, then please do so. And think about how this setting is described to you. Sometimes plays have multiple settings. This one does not. So as you can see here on the left, this is where all of the action takes place. So try and imagine, what would it be like to have an entire family living in such a small space? What would it feel like to be in the audience and to be watching this, to feel like you're a part of it? If there's tension, how will you feel it? If there's conflict, how will you feel it? What's it like to watch all of these people moving around such a small space? What happens when somebody else enters the space? For example, Linda, we watch this play and we watch this family and we move through the play with this family and we understand the family, and then all of a sudden a stranger enters this very, very familiar atmosphere. So consider what it would feel like when something happens, when somebody says something, when there is conflict, and other significant events. How does the setting add to how you understand that, and even how the characters maybe respond to each other or act? Now, with any play, you should be able to talk about a range of different dramatic devices, and these are devices that are used for dramatic effect in order to have an effect on the audience, but also to reveal something about characters, action and relationship. So here are some of the dramatic devices that you can comment on for Raisin and the Sun. So you have outside influences, so things that maybe disrupt the play or disrupt the action. So telephone calls, doorbells. So think about when they occur. What do they signal? If you go back through the play and you try and track every time there is a noise, an external noise, think about what was happening before. How does it interrupt the action? Which character does it interrupt? Which character engages with this particular noise? What does a telephone call, what news does it bring? How does that interrupt the action? How does it affect the action? How does it bring conflict? So it would be a good idea for revision to go back and just make a note of where we see all these different things. Entrances and exits is definitely another one. Pay close attention to who is on stage, at what point they leave and why, who enters at what point and why, and what the effect of all of this is. The introduction of new characters, so when we have a new character, so I already mentioned Linda, so in what way are they introduced? What's the first thing that they do? What's the first thing that they say? How do other characters react to them? How do we react to them as the audience? I've already mentioned staging up here, so the organisation of the furniture, where the characters are, if they're at the front of the stage, if they're at the back of the stage, if a particular action has been laid out for you in the stage directions, for example, Walter jumping on the table and dancing. So all of this staging is very important. Then we have dialogue versus stage directions. So dialogue is what the characters say, it's their words, but the stage directions are either in brackets or italics, and they are the directions that the actors are given. So sometimes there will be a conflict between dialogue and stage directions, and a character may say one thing, but we may be able to see from the stage directions that maybe they think something different. The stage directions reveal a lot about characters, how they feel about something. They also reveal a lot about relationships. How long a character speaks for, this can also link back to the structure of a scene. So how long they speak for, why, what does this show about them? So if Mama talks for longer than anybody else, then you could maybe say that this shows that she has dominance, that the others respect her. Think about who speaks, when they speak, why they speak at that particular moment. Interruptions, this is something that happens quite a lot throughout the play. Different characters will interrupt each other, and you'll know this because there is a dash that shows a sentence is incomplete or a thought is incomplete. So think about what that creates. Does it create tension? Does it show conflict? Is it actually to do with somebody who is overcome with emotion and they feel that they need to interrupt somebody else? And the beginning and the ending of scenes. So again, how does it start? How does it end? Think to yourself, why has the examiner picked this particular extract? Like, what do they want me to understand? What do they want me to try and pick out? What is interesting about this particular extract? So there should be a clear progression of something, whether it's relationship or it's an event or it's character development. So think about how it begins, how it ends, and what's developed in between. Okay, so this is the example that we are going to look at today. So in your exam, you will obviously get your extract and then you will get your question. Now, in terms of the steps that you must go through, there are a few different steps that I advise that you take, just so that you can ensure that your ideas are focused, they are relevant, and that you've really prepared yourself before you start to write up your answer. So the first one is quite simple. Read the question and deconstruct it. Deconstruct it means take it apart. Pull out the key words. Think about what those key words mean. What directions are you given? What are you expected to look for? Highlight the key words. Think about what they mean. If you're not sure what they mean, try and think about other words that you think may be similar. Try and help you with that. Think about what your focus is. Write these at the top of the extract. So just write little notes to yourself. So for example, if we look at this question, how does Hansbury make this such an engaging moment in the play? So here the key word obviously is engaging. So you must make sure that you are repeating this word or words that are similar to this throughout your answer to show the examiner that what you're saying is relevant. But you also know now what you're looking for. You're looking for anything that is engaging, that really grabs the attention of the audience. It really has an effect on the audience. And this is actually quite a nice question because it can be quite open. So you're just really looking for anything that stands out and that is interesting. The second step is to read the extract. So once you understand the question, you know what you're looking for, you've made some notes at the top of your extract, you can go through and you can think about where it's from. So hopefully by the time you get to the exam, you've read the play at least twice, and you've made notes on the key events, the key characters, how things progress. It also would be a good idea for you to write down what happens in each scene. So what is interesting in each scene that you could maybe comment on. So you need to be able to place the extract within the play. You do not have to say this is from page 45 to 47 or this is Act 2, Scene 3. But you should show through your answer that you understand what has happened prior to this extract. So what position are the characters in? What frame of mind are the characters in? What's happened to relationships up until this point? So again, reading through the play a few times will help you to be able to do this. So what is happening? What do you see? Is there a key event that you can comment on? Is there something that we're moving towards in the extract? Who is involved? Most likely you won't have all characters involved in the scene, but who is involved? What do you already know about these characters, how they interact with each other, their relationship, or even their own personal journey? Where is it? Now, for this particular play, like I said, It's the same place, so the set doesn't really change. Why is this particular scene significant? What is the mood? So is it uplifting? Is it joyous? Is it happy? Is it hopeful? Or is it quite negative? Is there conflict? Is there a depressing feel? What are the themes that we see? So do we see the theme of gender, or do we see the theme of discrimination or racism? Do we see the theme of hopes and dreams? Think about what Hansberry's trying to show you in this particular scene. What does she want to show you about Walter? Or what does she want to show you about Walter and Ruth's relationship? Or what does she want to show you about Beneatha and her ambitions? What do you already know about the characters and their relationships? At what point are we? So are we at the point where Walter and Mama kind of are within this conflict where they can't really agree on what to do with the money? Or are we at a point in the play where Walter and Mama have kind of reconciled and everybody's a bit more positive and hopeful? So just make sure that you do understand what is happening at that particular point. And give yourself time to brainstorm ideas. So there's nothing wrong with you spending some time writing a few notes on the extract, just to kind of give yourself some ideas of what you already know, because a lot of the notes that you may make, you may then be able to attribute to different quotations that you decide to pick out later on. Okay, so if we now look closely at the extract, imagine that this is what you would do in your exam. So this is from the question. This is the keyword that we're looking at, what makes this particular extract engaging. But also think about these questions. What do you learn in the extract about characters, their motivations, their relationship with others? What makes it engaging? How do you know? Your how, again, makes reference to techniques. You can talk about dramatic devices here as well. So if you say that it's engaging because a character reacts in this way, how do you know they react in this way? Well, it would be a stage direction, and then that is a dramatic device. And then you think to yourself, why? Why has Hansberry presented a character in this way? Why has she made the character say this? Or why does the character do this? Or why does this character speak for so long? Why does this character interrupt another character? So always ask yourself, what's her motivation here? What does she want you to understand? And as I just mentioned, you should be commenting here on the significance of this extract. So as you read through, just make a few notes about what you learn, what's important about it, what's interesting, and also what you already know about the characters and their relationships. So as you can probably already see just from having a quick look, we have Mama here, we have Walter, we only have Ruth briefly because she leaves, and then later down here we have Travis. So you could have a quick brainstorm about what you already know about the relationships that these characters have, or even about the characters themselves. And then some of that information you may then use in your answer later on. So what I would like you to do now is I would just like you to pause the video so you can actually do step 2. So you can read through the extract, you can make your notes, you can think about the question, and you can really show that you understand what is happening and who is involved and what stands out for you. So just pause the video and spend between 5 and 10 minutes just having a read and just making some notes on a piece of paper. Okay, so hopefully you spent some time reading through the extract for yourself, and hopefully you've managed to make a few notes. So here are some of the notes that you could have had. You may have more than what I've written down here. This is just a few examples of my own. So in terms of the significance of the extract, so here we see that Mama finally gives control of the money to Walter. We know that the check it's a symbol that's been used, it's a motif that's been used all the way through the play. It's something that has hugely affected the lives of all of the youngers. And here we have this very significant moment where she finally relinquishes control of the money and she gives it to Walter, which is what he has been waiting for. What you also may have noticed once reading through this extract is the mood does change. So it changes quite starkly as well. It's kind of split into two, where we have Walter, he's quite depressed, he's feeling quite sorry for himself, and Mama actually seems to be feeling quite guilty about it, and she's quite upset about her son and the way that he feels and the way that he's been behaving. And then we kind of, on this next slide, we have a change, and the mood suddenly becomes more buoyant and more hopeful, and the relationship is restored between them. And then we finish with Travis, who obviously is Walter's son, and then we have this really nice moment between the two of them. So there is definitely a journey throughout this extract, definitely for Walter, but also for the relationship that Walter has with his mother, but also his son. You could have made reference to the theme of hopes and dreams. So all of this is about not only the hopes and dreams of the entire family and what Mama hopes of the family, but also Walter's own hopes and dreams, and the way that he's been trying to make these become a reality. Also have the theme of relationships, as I've just mentioned. You've got Walter and his mother, but then Walter and his own son. You have the theme of segregation and discrimination. We see that a lot of the way that Walter feels about himself is due to the way that he is treated and the role that he is forced to play in society, due to the fact that he's an African-American man, and he's largely discriminated against, and the job that he has to do doesn't really make him happy. So what you already know about the characters and their relationships, we know that Walter, throughout this play so far, up until this point, has struggled with his own role, his role within the family, his identity as a father, a brother, a husband, and also a son. And also he has struggled with his manhood. He technically is the man of the house, yet we see that Mama makes a lot of the decisions and she wields a lot of the control and power within the house. He's got his own ambitions to open up a liquor store. He's very passionate about this. However, nobody really shares this dream with him. Nobody's really given him the confidence to go out and start up this venture. And up until this point, he hasn't been allowed to take control of the money in order to pursue his own dream. Mama is the head of the house, as I've just mentioned, and she's taken control of the check, which she does relinquish here in this extract. There has been lots of conflict previously, between Walter and pretty much everybody, really, apart from Travis. So we are expecting conflict because we already know that that's what really surrounds Walter. So it's no surprise that we do get some conflict. However, to an extent, it's resolved towards the end of this extract. And at this point, so this is Act 2, Scene 2, at this point, the characters have just realised that Walter has not been going to work. So rather than go and do his job, he's been going off and doing different things. And it does seem like he's become quite depressed and dissatisfied with his life. So that's what's been happening just before we get to this particular extract. Okay, so we've now gone through step 1 and step 2, and we're now going to be focusing on these steps. So this is step 3, 4, 5, and then 6. So the next thing that we're going to do, and this is actually quite an important step because everything that you do for step 3 will help you to formulate your answer, and it will help you to make an effective, relevant and detailed plan. So you're going to go through the extract with your highlighter or a pen to underline things, and you're going to highlight anything that you think is relevant to the question. Now, here I put you can use this list to help you. So everything that you do before you get to the extract and you start to highlight it is there to help you. Every idea that you've brainstormed, all of the words that you've written down, anything that you've noticed about the significance of the extract, this will help you to then really focus yourself on which quotations do I want to pick out, what particularly stands out here. So you go through and we're going to highlight anything that is relevant. Once you've done that, so you've initially gone through and highlighted, you may have highlighted quite a lot, you may not have highlighted so much. You then have a chance to go back and just either add more highlighting if you feel that you haven't got enough, but also just have a look at what you do have. So what is it that you can say about your examples? So you may go back to this list up here and you may say, well, this example, I think this really shows something about Walter's ambition. And that then can become one of your points later on. You may have the word ambition in there. Or you may have a quotation to think, this really shows something about Walter's identity. Or this shows something about his manhood. So what can you say about your example? What does it show? You can also maybe think about if there are any patterns that you can comment on. So if a character only ever really speaks in one line, you could say there's a pattern here. Ruth doesn't really say very much. She only speaks in one sentence at a time. Or you may say, well, this character actually hesitates quite a lot. Ellipsis is used throughout to show that they're not really sure what to say or they're nervous. So if you do see any patterns, then do comment on those as well. And you may decide to link quotes together. So there may be something similar within a quote. Maybe it's a word that a character repeats, or maybe characters repeat each other's words. So then maybe you want to use more than one quotation for one point. And then analyze these in as much detail as you can. And that's when we come back over here. So you may want to pause the screen and just make a note of some of these ideas, because these do help you with what to look for. They also help you with your analysis. So you want to be analysing for any interesting words, language, but you also may want to analyse for structure or form. You may want to talk about the length in which somebody speaks and what this means, and you want to show that you can interpret meaning. Or you may decide to comment on an exit, and that's a dramatic device, and say why this particular character exits at this time and what it means. So do try and analyse as much as you can. So here are some things that you can focus on. So I know it is difficult under time conditions to go back through an extract and know what to say about it, and it may be that your mind just goes blank. So it is a good idea to just have a set list of things that you try and remember for when you're in the exam. And if you do have a mind blank and you can't think of anything, then you just go back to this list that you've made and you think, okay, let me think, what do I need to look for? Oh, I need to look for conflict. Go back through. Do you find any conflict? You probably will. Or, okay, I need to look for tension. Do you find any tension? So all of these are useful for you in terms of what to look for. This list, I made this list purely based on a Raisin in the Sun, so all of these things are relevant. So do take time to read through this list, and it will help you to try and know what to look for and know what's interesting to select. So once you've gone through and you've tried to do a little bit of annotation and a little bit of analysis and maybe name some dramatic devices, then you can go back again and you can start to eliminate any of your choices. And by eliminate, I mean decide which ones maybe no longer fit or you don't think are as strong. So once you've been through and annotated, you may get to one of the quotations you initially highlighted and think, oh, I don't know what to say about this. I've got no idea what I can say. I can't really analyse anything. I don't think there's any interesting words. I can't see any dramatic devices, and that's okay. You just decide that that's not one that you are going to talk about. So it is a good idea to initially highlight whatever stands out for you, but then go back and be a little bit more selective and decide which ones you like and which ones actually are a little bit too weak, or you don't really know what you're going to say about them. And then once you're happy with the extract, you've got the highlighted bits that you're going to use, you've tried to annotate, you've got a few little notes, then you can make a plan. And your plan is just then maybe the different points that you want to make. And towards the end of this session, I will show you how to make a plan and what a plan looks like. Okay. So what we have here is the first part of the extract, and what I'm going to do is I will go through the extract and I will just highlight for you anything that I think is relevant. And what I will do is I'll model for you the reasons why I'm selecting these. I'll model for you the kind of things that you should be saying. So as you select them, you could also be annotating. So you can either go through the first time, highlight, then go back and annotate, or you can annotate as you go. And for the purpose of timing, I'm probably just going to talk to you as I go. I'm not going to annotate this, but I will talk to you as I go and explain what I would say about each one, or maybe why I've decided to pick. Okay, so don't forget that we have our list here of what we should be looking for. We also have the notes that you would have made before you even started to look in depth at this extract, but then we also have something here to remind us what the question is. So what makes it engaging? What do we see that is engaging? Okay, so the extract begins with Mama speaking, Now, what's interesting here is that she asks him a question. So I'm just going to highlight this for now because maybe I want to come back to the fact that the extract starts with a question. The question obviously prompts whatever Walter says. Now, before I even look at what Walter says, something immediately stands out for me. And it's to do with how much people speak. And I've said to you that this is to do with the form, but also the structure. So immediately I'm just going to do this. So that I know that maybe I may want to say, okay, the extract begins with Walter speaking in depth. And I can already see that every time Mama speaks, she actually doesn't speak for very long. It's Walter who actually speaks the most here. And usually when people speak the most, it's to do with the fact that they are controlling the situation, they are dominant in that situation or relationship, or there is some reason why they can't stop talking. Maybe they are nervous, or maybe they are agitated. So as I go through, I'm going to be thinking of why. Why is it that Walter speaks for so long in this particular scene? And I'm also going to remember that it's a play. So while he's speaking, Mama is going to be listening. So all the focus is going to be on Walter. Mama is going to be focused on Walter. We as the audience are going to be focused on Walter. Okay, so I'm not going to read everything out to you because I know that you've already read it, but I am just going to focus on what my eye is drawn to. Now, immediately my eye is drawn to all of these. So we have these dashes here. Okay, they're actually quite a lot. So because they're quite a lot, if I was to talk about this in my essay, then I would group them together. I would say where I got them from. I got them from the first time that Walter speaks in this scene. But I'm going to say that there are quite a lot of them here. Now, I've also noticed that there's one at the end, but I can already tell that this is not the same. Now, the reason that this one is not the same, because this shows this. So we have Ruth goes out quietly. Now, while we're down here, I'm just going to highlight this because this is a stage direction, but also it's a dramatic device because she is exiting the scene. So we have the speech here ends with this dash, which shows that he has been interrupted. He's interrupted by Ruth leaving, or he's interrupted by his mother. Now, these actually don't show interruption up here. So actually it shows hesitation, or it shows the emotion that he's feeling. So he says, Mama, you don't know all the things a man what got leisure can find to do in this city. What's this? Friday night? Well, Wednesday. So if we look at how many times we have this, we could almost say that it shows just how quickly his mind is moving. This is almost like he can't control his speech. The words are just tumbling out of his mouth. And that's what these dashes show. It's almost like he's a little bit manic here. And we do know that they've just found out that he's not been going to work. So this could be why all of his emotion is suddenly tumbling out of his mouth. And if you do read through this, you realize that actually he is quite sad, he's quite depressed, he's quite upset with the life that he currently has, and he's trying to explain his feelings to his mother. So actually I would say that a lot of these dashes are to do with the uncontrollable emotion that he's feeling and the fact that he's finally getting to reveal this to his mother. I'm also going to pick out not just the punctuation here, but also what he says. So he says that instead of going to work, he parked his car and he sat and looked at the steel mills all day long. And then he also comments on the big black chimneys. And those stand out for me because I think, well, why? Why is he looking at steel mills and why is he looking at chimneys? Now, actually, these are symbols of industry and they represent work for him. So maybe this could be an example of the restriction that he feels. It could be an example of the life that he feels he's been forced into. So this is to do with manual work. And then we also have down here these questions. So he repeats these questions here. Are you sad? Are you all depressed? So it's almost like he's mocking them a little bit. So he's trying to relay his emotions and he feels that for quite a while he's been ignored, which is why he maybe ends with these questions to them. You sad, you depressed by what I'm saying? Because I'm the one who's been living with all of this. And then we come back to this. Ruth goes out quietly. So not only is this a stage direction and it's a dramatic device because she leaves, but we can also comment on this word quietly. Ask yourself why. Why does she go out quietly? Why does she go out at all? So it could be argued that she recognizes that this is a situation that needs to be dealt with between mother and son. And that's the reason why she decides to leave. She goes out quietly because maybe she doesn't want to interrupt this kind of tirade that he's on. She doesn't want to interrupt his train of thought. Or it may be that she is upset by all of this and she feels like she can't deal with it right now. So it's important that his wife has left the scene right now. And as I said before, we do have this interruption, and it's from Mama. Now, she actually isn't talking to Walter. She says, "Oh, big Walter, is this the harvest of our days?" So it's like she's lamenting the life that they have. She's calling upon her dead husband, and she's saying, "Is this it? Is this what we lived for? Is this what we worked so hard for?" So it's interesting that she uses the word harvest here. So not only does harvest remind us of field work, quite difficult work, manual labour, but it also has religious connotations of reaping and harvesting and kind of creating something new, a new life. And the reason why she calls upon him is, again, because maybe she is inconsolable about what she's learned. She doesn't really understand her son anymore. She doesn't understand what his issues are. And again, we kind of have a conflict here between the different generations, in that Mama is from a completely different generation where she worked extremely hard. She migrated from the south to the north just in order to have a better life. So the fact that she is able to work, she's just quite grateful for that. Whereas Walter wants a little bit more from his life. It's not just that he wants to be able to work, but he wants to be able to do something he can be proud of. So we can talk about this word perhaps later on. And the fact that she no longer is engaging with Walter. She's talking to her dead husband. So we think about why she decides to do that, why she decides to call on this memory of her dead husband. And remember that she technically she's taken over this family, so she is the matriarch here, even though you would imagine that Walter is the man of the house. So she's taken on this responsibility, but maybe it's too much of a burden for her right now. And then I would go again to here. So there is a pattern. I said you should maybe look out for patterns. So again, Walter is being cut off here by his mother. So now she's directly talking to him. So he's talking about music. He's talking about saxophone player when he goes to the Green Hat. And it's almost like Walter is in his own world here. So if you notice, he kind of picks up where he left off. He says, "Do you know where I'm going right now?" And he's going to the Green Hat. And he's been slightly interrupted by this, but he picks it back up. And this could argue that maybe Walter is completely in his own world here. He doesn't really need Mama to be there. He just needs to be able to vent his emotions. He needs to be able to speak to somebody. She's just the person that receives this. She's the vehicle by which we're able to understand his emotions and his inner thoughts. And then we have the stage direction here. Raisin, getting some papers out of her handbag. So stage directions are always important. So we're always going to try and think about what we learn from them. So again, she hasn't really responded to what he said either. So they're like two different conversations happening in the same place. But she does call him by name. So she's getting something out of her handbag and then she calls him by name. Unfortunately, she can't finish because she is also interrupted. And then again, we go back to Walter. And we have this use of ellipsis here, which stands out. And we also have ellipsis up here as well. So we have quite a lot of ellipsis. And again, I think it really shows the fact that Walter's words are tumbling out of his mouth. He can't control his emotions. He can't control how he feels. He has all of these things that he needs to talk about, and the ellipsis shows the fact that he can't even really organize these ideas properly. So he says, there's this other guy who plays the piano, and they got a sound. I mean, they can work on some music. They got the best little combo. You can just sit there and drink. So there are so many things that he wants to talk about, and the ellipsis just shows maybe how much conflict he really is inside his own mind, that he just keeps talking and talking. And then we have again this interruption. And Mama says, I've helped you to do it, haven't I, son? Walter, I've been wrong. So this is the second time that she calls him son. So we also start the extract off with her saying son. And it's a question. So we start off with, what have you been doing for these days, son? And then we have here, I've helped to do it to you, haven't I, son? So I would maybe think about why she repeats this word, why she uses the word son rather than his name as she does up here. So it's obviously not being effective here. It's not caught his attention. So maybe to remind him of the bond that they share, to remind him of their relationship, but it also maybe to remind herself of the responsibility that she has to him as her son. And then she says, Walter, I've been wrong. And so we have this short sentence here. Now it's the only thing that snaps him out of this reverie, the only thing that snaps him out of this monologue that won't cease, is Walter, I've been wrong. Now, because it kind of draws him out of this, we could argue that perhaps this is a turning point in the extract. And if it is a turning point, then we want to be able to maybe talk about that. Maybe the mood changes here, or maybe there's a contrast. So he suddenly does respond. No, you ain't never been wrong about nothing, Mama. So we have this repetition here. So they both repeat the same word. And maybe it shows their relationship, maybe it shows the bond that they have, but also maybe it shows that they're about to kind of come full circle in this. So they've been quite separate up here. So they're both talking about different things. They interrupt each other quite a lot. They're very separate. So maybe here this repetition of the same word between mother and son kind of symbolizes the fact that they maybe are going to become more unified as it progresses. Okay, so let's move on to the second part of this extract. So what you will notice is that Mama actually has quite a long speech here. So again, I'm going to do what I did at the beginning with Walter's speech. As it stands out to me, I want to be able to remember it later on. So I'm just going to highlight it. Now you would ask yourself why at this point her speech is so long. So maybe part of your essay is that you want to talk about the length of time that people spend talking and what that shows about them or their relationship. Now we already know from the notes that we made that actually Mama down here, she's the head of the house, she's taking control. This signifies that maybe she's going to be taking control again. And the fact that her first words here are imperative show that maybe, she has decided to take back control. She can see that she isn't really getting through to him, and she now needs to kind of turn things around. So we start with this imperative, listen to me now. And we have this repetition of the word wrong again. So she says, listen to me now, I say I've been wrong, son. And we have this word again. So it shows more of an intimate relationship here. And remember that as an audience to watch this, think about the relationship that you're being allowed to see here, this intimate relationship that we have between mother and son. There's been so much conflict between them. And even just at the start of this extract, there's been so much conflict. And then through the repetition of wrong, showing that she's taking responsibility, but also the repetition of the word son, it reminds us of this relationship that they have and this relationship that they can get back. So she says, that's what I've been doing to you, what the rest of the world been doing to you. So this is interesting, what I've been doing to you and the rest of the world has been doing to you. And we could link this to the theme of segregation and discrimination. And she's actually acknowledging the fact that the world that Walter lives in isn't easy for him. It's not been easy for him as a black man in a white society to get along and to have his own hopes and dreams. And then she says his name again. And we have this dash here that shows that she pauses. And the stage directions really explain that. So she stops and he looks up slowly at her and she meets his eyes pleadingly. Now you should ask yourself, what stands out here? So she does look up at him, but it's this word. I want to talk about language here. It's the idea of she looks at him pleadingly. What is she pleading for? Is it for forgiveness? Is it for him to kind of come back to her and to come back to the family? Does she want him to listen to her? Does she want him to understand her? Is she showing him that she understands him? So definitely this word stands out. And she says, what you ain't never understood is that I ain't got nothing, don't own nothing, ain't never really wanted nothing. So we have this repetition of nothing. And we could comment on the fact that it's at the end of all of these clauses. So if you have a repetition of words or phrases at the end of successive clauses, that's antistrophe. So we could talk about that using a technical term, or we could just talk about the repetition. And this reminds us of the struggle that she's been through. It reminds us of the struggle that most African American working class families would have faced. But it also reminds you of the strength of family and the strength of relationships, because this sentence ends with the word you, to show that everything she did has been for her family. And then we have this repetition again. So we've had got nothing, nothing, nothing. And then she repeats this nothing, but she kind of inverts the meaning here. So there ain't nothing as precious to me. There ain't nothing worth holding if it means it's going to destroy my boy. So she repeats nothing, but it has been inverted because she's showing that none of it really matters unless she's got her son. And again, we've got this use of dashes here to show that maybe she's hesitating, or maybe the words aren't easy to come out of her mouth, because we've got if it means it's going to destroy my boy. So maybe she's overcome with emotion here because she's realised the extent of Walter's unhappiness and his bitterness with his life. And notice how she used the word boy. So we've got son up here, and now we've got boy. So there's lots of different terms of endearment here. And you ask yourself, why does she call him a boy here? And it does remind us of their relationship and the responsibility that she feels, but also this maternal instinct that she's got towards him, that he will always be her boy, even though he is a grown man. Now, this action is important because we know what is in the envelope. We know that the money has been quite significant all the way through the play. It's mentioned all the time, all the characters talk about it. So we know what's going to be in this envelope. So it's important that we understand that the stage directions here are quite significant. Okay, so then she explains that she's giving him the rest of the money. And she says here, for you to decide. And this is a short sentence, and the reason why I'm saying it's a short sentence is because it's probably something that you would want to comment on. If we look at all of the sentences here, they're quite long. There's lots of hesitations. There's lots of dashes. We feel there's a lot of emotion, but this is quite succinct. It's quite straightforward. It's for you to decide. It's like she's made a decision, but the fact that it's a short sentence also shows how significant this decision is, not just for her, but for Walter. And then we have, she drops her hands a little helplessly. And this kind of reminds me of this word up here. So notice how I'm trying to always make links between the different aspects of the extract that I'm annotating. So she drops her hands a little helplessly. So think about why this word has been used. Why does she drop her hands helplessly? Because this is all that she can do. This is everything that she has. There's not much more that she can do for her son, but she doesn't really know how he's going to react. She's given it all to him. She's given him her everything. It ain't much, but it's all I've got in the world, and I'm putting it in your hands. I'm telling you to be the head of this family from now on, like you're supposed to be. So head of this family, putting it in your hands for you to decide. So here we see a turning point where she's relinquishing the power that she has, and she's delivering that power to Walter, which is something that we know that he's struggled with. So as we've already said, Danny, he has struggled with his role within the family. The fact that his identity is linked to his manhood and to masculinity, and to be head of the family is something that he really does want. And notice how he doesn't say much here. So we've had all of this, these long speeches from Walter, these rambling statements, and it's almost like what she says here and what she does really snaps him out of it and brings him back to the real world. And he just asks her a question: do you trust me like that, Mama? And again, this link to show their relationship. So the use of son, the use of boy, the use of Mama just really binds them together. And again, we have them sharing words. So they shared the word wrong earlier on. Now they're sharing the word trust. So maybe this shows that their relationship has now developed and they've got to this point where they trust each other. And then she leaves, which is quite poignant that she leaves at this particular time. It's like their relationship has been tied back together. Something has been resolved between the two of them, and it's an apt time for her to leave. And remember that there is an audience and we are watching, and he is now alone by himself on the stage with his dreams and his hopes and his masculinity, and he's now head of the house. And it's almost like she has to leave in order for us, the audience, to see him in his new role by himself, but also for him to be able to feel his new role by himself without his mother there to support it. Then we have all of these stage directions, so we're just going to look for anything interesting. So he sits looking at the money, and then finally, in a decisive gesture, he gets up and in mingled joy and desperation picks up the money. So I'm just going to think about the vocabulary that's used here, the word choice: decisive gesture. Now, look at this word decisive. This is not the Walter that we've seen previously. This is the Walter that we now see because Mama has given him her trust and she's given him the money. It's almost like this has transformed him. He now is able to be decisive, to make decisions because she has empowered him to do that. And then we have this mingled joy and desperation. So kind of have this juxtaposition of words here. We have joy and we have desperation. It shows just how conflicted he's been about everything, but it also shows just how significant the money is. Obviously, he's happy, he experiences joy to have this, but there's desperation to live up to his own hopes and dreams in order to do something for himself. Now, obviously, it's not in this extract, but we do know later on that he gives his money to his friend in order to start up his liquor store, and that was the wrong decision because the money is then stolen for him. But at this point, the word desperation shows just how desperate he is to prove himself, to show that he can make good decisions for the family. And at the same moment, we have Travis. So dramatic device, we have a character who leaves, but then we have a character who enters. Now, Walter is in the middle of both of these characters and he has relationships with both of them. So his mother leaves and his son comes in. And this is a relationship where he can be more dominant, he can be caring, he can be the decisive one because it's his son. And then we have this interaction between them. And think about how the tone has significantly changed since the beginning. So the stage directions: sweetly, more sweetly than we have ever known him. This is a dramatic transformation in Walter, and it's very significant that it's his son that received this because he wants to be a good role model for his son. He wants to be somebody that his son can look up to, and that's very, very important for him in terms of his role within the family, but for his own kind of ideas of manhood. And then he says, "No, Daddy ain't drunk. Daddy ain't never going to be drunk again." So how declarative this statement is, because he now has hope. He now has his dream. So we can link it back to the themes here. He has this renewed self-confidence in himself and in where he can now take his family. And then we end with this rather touching and intimate scene between them. The father has come from behind the couch and leans over, embracing his son. So it's quite poignant that we end on this way. And it gives not only the Walter hope, but it also gives the audience hope. We are witnessing this scene, this quite intimate scene between father and son, and we feel positive for the family. We feel hopeful. We feel that maybe things will change for them. And always ask yourself, why do we feel that at this particular point? Why does Hansberry want us to feel such hope and such positivity for the family. And ultimately it is because later on Linda enters, and their hopes are slightly dashed there, and then also Walter loses the money and their hopes are slightly dashed again there. So there are many ups and downs within this play, and always ask yourself, why am I supposed to feel this at this particular moment? Okay, so once you've highlighted, you can then start to make your plan. So in order to do that, you're going to go back and you're going to think about which examples help you to answer the question. It may be that you've highlighted quite a lot and then you decide that there are some that you want to cut out. So remember to eliminate anything that you don't think is strong enough. But also really, focus on the ones that you do think are interesting and make little notes around them. And do analyse as you go. Obviously, I've been verbally analysing, but you would do this with making the notes just to remind yourself when you come to write up your answer. So once you've made your final decisions, then do just think about what you are going to say about the examples, and you may formulate points as you're going through this. So your points obviously will give direction to your essay. They kind of are the topic sentence of each paragraph. And these points come out of whatever annotations that you may make around the quotations. So think about what's your initial idea in response to the question. What is it that makes this such an engaging moment in the play? Is it the relationships that we see? Or is it the way that characters respond to each other? Or is it the entrances and the exits? What is your evidence in response? So this is what you've highlighted and hopefully annotated. How is your idea shown in the evidence? This is where we want to be talking about dramatic devices, the methods that Hansberry uses, the language choices, and then also, like I've mentioned, why. Why does Hansberry do this? Why does she use this? Okay, so now we have our highlighted selections and we're just going to go back and we're going to eliminate. So what we're going to do is we are going to go back and decide which examples are going to be helpful, which examples we want to keep, and which examples we don't think actually would be useful to us in the exam. So the first thing I'm going to look at is I'm just going to look at this that I've highlighted, because not only have I highlighted this here, but I have also highlighted it here on the second part of the extract. I'm going to keep this because I think it would be useful to talk about how much characters speak. Not only because it says a lot about them, but also because we actually have a difference in the two different parts of this scene in terms of who dominates the conversation, when they dominate the conversation, why they dominate the conversation, and then what happens afterwards. So because we move from Walter speaking the most here to Mama speaking the most here, this is actually a selection that I'm going to keep. I'm also going to keep his reference to steel mills and big black chimneys, because I particularly think that this imagery really represents the despair that Walter feels, and I think it would be quite good to compare this to the joy and the exuberance that he feels later on. So I'm also going to keep these selections right here. I'm going to keep all of these interruptions, okay, because at the moment it may be that I want to use these interruptions as part of my essay to talk about the relationship between these two characters. So I'd like to keep these for the time being. I think I'm also going to keep these ideas about the relationship between them due to the fact that they repeat each other's vocabulary. So we actually have two examples of this. We have this example here where we have both of them repeat the word wrong, but then we also have this over here where they both repeat the word trust. And not only do I think it shows a bond between them that they repeat each other's words and vocabulary, but also the fact that we change from the word wrong, which has negative connotations, to the word trust, which has positive connotations, I think really shows a transition in their relationship. So I'm definitely going to keep those. Okay, so I think that's probably it for this page. So if we move on, I'm going to focus on Mama's selection here. Now I think what I'm going to speak about here is the vocabulary that she uses. So where we've got Walter talking about chimneys and steel mills, we actually have Mama's own struggle here. So we have Walter's struggle with his life, and his position in society, but we also have a little bit of Mama's struggle here. So I think I'm going to keep all of these words that she repeats that really just show how she's feeling as well, but also the way that she views her own role. So the fact that she repeats nothing up here. I am also going to keep the language that's used here in the stage directions, because I think I can actually link these two words together, the pleadingly, the helplessly. Not only do I think it shows her role, but it also says something about their relationship, and it also builds up to the action of giving him the money, which is obviously what Walter has been wanting all this time. And then I'm going to keep this stage direction here, because I think this really also shows a turning point, not only in the scene, but in Walter, because as she leaves and Travis enters, we see a much more empowered, positive, happy and hopeful Walter, especially through this stage direction of mingled joy and desperation. So definitely going to keep this one as well. And I'm probably going to pair this idea of mingled joy and desperation with this sweetly, more sweetly than we've ever known him, because we kind of feel like the character of Walter has completely transformed at this time, and the way that this scene ends is in direct contrast to the way that it begins. I'm possibly going to keep this word embrace as well, just to show the intimate relationship that we have between father and son. Okay, so now you've gone back through and you've eliminated the points that you've decided maybe aren't helpful, or you've just, as I've done, circled or ticked the ones that you really do think that you'll be able to use and comment on. And notice how, as I've been doing that, I've been justifying these decisions to myself. And that's what you should be doing as well. Justify them. Can you talk about them? Is there anything you can say about them? Are they relevant? And that will kind of help you make your final decisions. And then you should make a brief plan. Now, this is the plan that I made based upon my selections. So out of all the different things that I've highlighted, these are the various things that I think that I could talk about in an essay. So just remind yourself at this point what the question is. How does Hansberry make this such an engaging moment in the play? And one way to kind of help you formulate your ideas or your points is to just rephrase the question in your head. So Hansberry makes this such an engaging moment in the play by entrances and exits, or by using stage directions, or by showing a change in mood and emotion, or by presenting the relationships between Mama and Walter or Mama and Travis, or by showing contrast between characters, or by using interruptions, or by using the length of speech. So all of these could actually be points that you could use in your essay. Obviously, you cannot talk about all of these. So at this point, what you would do is you would decide which ones that you feel are the best for you, which ones you think that you actually have the most amount of quotations for, or the most interesting quotations for, and you would select possibly 3 or 4, depending on how much time you think you've got to write up your answer. Okay, so now you have gone through the extract, you have a pretty good idea of what you want to say about how Hansberry makes a scene engaging. You should at this point have a lot of evidence at your disposal. You should have several quotations that you've highlighted, that you've annotated, and that you can then use within your essay. You should have a range of dramatic devices that you can comment on. Notice as I was going through the extract, I was pulling those out, reminding myself what the name of that method was, if it's a stage direction or if it's an entrance or an exit. You should have some notes and analysis, some annotation of the extract as you've gone through, because this really, really will help when you write up your essay. You probably will find yourself, if you have got good detailed notes, merely just taking those notes and just formulating them into full sentences, rather than having to think about everything quickly off the top of your head. And you should have a clear plan. So it's absolutely fine, like I did, to have 5, 6, even 7 points on your plan, but then just to kind of take that apart and think to yourself, like, which are the ones that I actually can talk about and I can say a lot about, and maybe just end up with 3 or 4. And then you can use this up to write your answer in detail. Now, before I go, just remember, try and use the dream technique to help you. So as I've been going through this lesson, I've been using all of this vocabulary and terminology as I've been going, and this does really, really help you. So deconstruct the question, find out what are the keywords, what instructions are you given, what is your focus, because that keyword, again, is the word that you will come back to again and again in your answer. Read, understand, and highlight the extract. Once you've highlighted and made your choices, analyse these choices, annotate your choices so that you know that you've got enough to say later on. Eliminate any irrelevant or weak choices, anything that you've decided, actually, I don't know what I would say about that dash, I don't know what I would say about that question. If you're not sure, choose something else. And then the final point in this, make a plan. Make a clear plan that you can follow, that kind of keeps you on track, that ensures that what you are saying is relevant and it's coherent, and you're getting your marks for your personal response for AO4. So thank you very much for taking part in this lesson. Please look out for the next one, which is how to write up your answer for the extract section of this exam. Thank you very much. Goodbye.